at $900 each.
Let's go to the Farm Bureau phone line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau, and welcome in for the very first time Mississippi State's head football coach, Mike Leach. Coach, appreciate a few minutes of your time. I'm curious. I'm sure there's some football activity, but what are you doing to entertain yourself, to keep busy in this time with nothing else much going on?
Well, there's very little football activity. This is one of those things that kind of transcends sports that we're in the middle of here, and so. The biggest thing is try to make a productive time, reading, keep in touch with people, and make sure we're on track. The academic effort, I guess, with regard to our team is one of the most challenging because they have to do it over the internet, but making sure they have access and computers and things like that.
If you had to give one book recommendation, like somebody was sitting down there like, you know what, I haven't been a regular reader, and I need a book recommendation, and it was not one of the books that you've actually written, what would you advise people to read?
If it's not one of the books that I what?
Not one of the books that you have authored. I mean, those are obviously required reading, but if you were going to make another recommendation, what would it be?
Okay, I'll tell you what I'm in the middle of right now, and I've read other books, or I've read other stuff by Willie Morris, but people in the state of Mississippi and those that aren't are just curious about it, read My Mississippi by Willie Morris.
Okay. I think My Dog Skip is another pretty good Willie Morris book that's out there. So My Mississippi by Willie Morris.
Which one did you read?
It's called My Dog Skip.
Oh, yeah, that's outstanding. I've read that.
Yep, that's a good one. I want to get into some different stuff with you, but I'm curious about the kind of the practical side of the football piece of what's going on right now. You're first-year head coach at Mississippi State. Obviously, you've been a lot of places and coached ball for a long time, but it feels like this was an important spring to install the offense, to install the defense, to get to know your players. It looks like that's completely out the window. How big of a deal is that going forward into year number one?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, nobody else gets spring either, but I think year one it's particularly important. We're going to have to be really good at, teaching our players. And we're going to have to, in other words, we're going to have to make more of our film when we get when we're allowed to. We're going to have to make more of our film, our walkthroughs, and our practices than in the past, just get the most out of it that we can, and may have to make some choices on simplifying some things. But in any case, it is an important time. Some will be mitigated by the fact that others don't get it, but, installing it is very important because there's a point to where, once you have it in for a couple of years, then the older players can help bring along the younger players. We're not in that position. And so it'll be a challenge, but, you just deal with it as it comes.
Mike Leach on your radio, head football coach at Mississippi State. If the NCAA were to allow some additional practice time, let's just say that spring is completely out the window, what would you want to see that look like? Would it be 5 extra practices? Is it 10 extra practices, or is that a bad idea, adding that to fall camp kind of going into the year?
Well, that's awfully tough to speculate. It depends when. And then, there's different things you can do. You can, whether it's walkthroughs or allowed to have some lower tempo stuff with the ball, or whether it's meetings. But there is a point to where, if you pack it too close to camp, there's a point to where if you're overly, let's say you get the extra practices and it's right in camp, if your squad's overly taxed, physically, and you're just having extra practices, you're working on something, but you're not working on football, because it's a game of execution.
What is your expectation for the quarterback position?
The biggest thing, we just have to figure out which guy can do the best job moving the offense. And, and the expectation is really always the same, and different quarterbacks have different qualities and capabilities. But, in the end, you want the guy that can move the offensive unit the best, and and it takes reps to identify that, and that's definitely as soon as we're able to practice. That's a priority for us to identify that.
Mike Leach on your radio. I'm curious, I guess 3 months or so that you've been in Mississippi. What have you learned about Mississippi that you didn't know coming in?
I was actually quite familiar with Mississippi, whether it was from recruiting there, people that I've known and coached from there, being in and out of there over the last 30 years. I can't say any tremendous surprises. I mean, there's a great deal of camaraderie in Mississippi, and also just tremendous quality of football players and commitment to football and commitment to just going out there and achieving things together. And I've always admired that. I would say and then there's history in Mississippi everywhere, which you can spend your whole life and not uncover all of that. I would say that one thing that became a little clearer to me in the last couple months would be the other places. In Mississippi, as you get closer to it, different regions have different qualities. Different regions have different backgrounds. Different regions have different characteristics and idiosyncrasies, and I think that is really fascinating because I didn't know Mississippi in that fashion before I got there. I mean, you got the Gulf, you got the Delta, you've got the piney woods, you got the prairie, you got the whole thing, and so I think learning those distinctions really is kind of what's got me fascinated recently.
Hey, Coach, it's Brian Haydad. We were talking about Kylan Hill before you jumped on with us just a moment ago, and obviously your offense has been known for great quarterbacks and great receivers, and you've had a lot of good running backs in your time. But with a running back like Kylan Hill, who Mississippi State fans are used to seeing carry the ball 20-plus times a game, that's likely to change, I would imagine. What can he bring to this offense, and can he be the same kind of weapon he was in a more ground-based offense, in an air raid offense?
Well, our running backs over the years typically will lead the conference in sometimes all-purpose yards, but definitely yards from scrimmage, and so and those yards spend the same whether it's on the ground or in the air. By position, our running back position touches the ball more than any other position. But we're obviously not going to exclusively hand it off. We definitely will a significant amount, but we expect to throw it, and it'll look a lot like those running backs on Sunday, I think.
Mike Leach visiting with coaches. You were talking about kind of the history of Mississippi, and people certainly know about your fascination and your interest in the history of pirates and war strategy. I'm curious where all of that comes from. Is there just a thirst for knowledge? Is it because of reading and something triggered you somewhere along the way where I want to learn more about a lot of different things?
I think it happened when I was a kid. I also think, talking to my mom, like my mom used to stay up late and, just stories in general, whether it was history or just stories or something she'd read or something she'd seen. And then, of course, TV back then, you only had a few channels, and because we lived out in the country. And so then the imagination would kind of unfold, and then you'd read what you could about it. But, history provides, the greatest storyteller that there is history. Because history has all kinds of stories, and, of course, there's all kinds of people that you can learn things from. And I think that's not only is it significant and should be significant to everyone, but also the stories are just outstanding. And that and there's so many instances where truth is wilder than fiction. And because some true stories you couldn't make a movie out of it because nobody would believe it because it would be, so crazily coincidental that it would seem contrived. But no, there's one fascinating story after the next. I was talking to another guy on the radio who's fascinated by Lewis and Clark, and but you can just imagine the stories there. And I have barely scratched the surface on Lewis and Clark.
Is there? I know you. I don't know if scholar is the right word or just interested in war history, but is there a conflict, a war through history that stands out or is more interesting to you than others because of the circumstances surrounding it?
The Civil War. Civil War is always, in part of it, with the Civil War. Well, first of all, you had kind of the convergence of our country. You had a lot of, different, whether, states' rights, federal rights, all the stuff that melded together. I mean, and then in the end, I think that, we remained a union. And so I think that the Civil War was fascinating from the forces going on in our country, because there was noble, a great deal of noble people on all sides, and not always that didn't always agree, but were about what was best for the country and their family, I think, generally speaking. And then, but the other thing from a warfare standpoint, it's where modern warfare was ushered in. The modern era of war developed in the Civil War. You went from single-shot firearms to repeating firearms. You went from, kind of little grenades or charges you'd set off to even a limited amount of aerial bombing. You went from where, these siege armies would, run into one another but never leave their supply lines, to then where, you'd routinely leave your supply line to go execute attacks, like, whether it was like, examples would be Stonewall Jackson or William Tecumseh Sherman, leave the supply lines and go off the land and embrace your enemy in a very quick fashion. And I think there are a lot of things that came together in the Civil War that, for good or for bad, I mean, it is changed the method of warfare in a fairly sudden period of time, maybe more so than any other time.
Coach, if you're interested in the Civil War, I got to get you down to my hometown of Vicksburg, Mississippi. We'll give you all the Civil War talk.
I've been to the battlefield. I've walked the battlefield, and I've checked it out, and the bluffs, and they even tried to divert the river, and some of the mansions would move their gear to a cave, and what if? Yes.
Mike, I'm curious if you're hard to work for. Like in terms of assistant coaches, you put your staff together. Are you a demanding boss? Are you a guy that just kind of lets guys get their work done, and as long as they're doing it, you're not exactly worried about what office hours look like? What do you like to work for?
I'm pretty result determinative. Everybody's got their job, and I try to give them the leeway to do it because I don't want to stifle creativity and innovation. But together we have to, get the best results we can, and I think it's very important that we're working on all cylinders in everybody's office. We don't have them up yet. We were about to have them up when this whole virus thing came, but it's going to be a sign that says you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen, and I think everybody needs to embrace and abide by that. I think that. I think people that are highly motivated that want to get things accomplished, or their mind and their heart's all in the same place. They want to get things done. Now, the majority of the people on my staff I've worked for or coached in some form or fashion before. And I'm probably not the perfect guy to ask that. It'd be better to ask them. But I try to, focus on the objective, like when do we go home? Well, when we're done. Well, when do we come in? Well, do you have anything to do? I mean, because you do hit that dead period. It's like, I mean, somewhere in July, I went to the office to grab something, and there's a couple of coaches in there. I said, why are you here? Why are you here? Shouldn't you be, in some cases they're, they're all set and they're going to go do something with their family, and they're there for the same reason I was. And a couple other cases, they're just desk guarders and just nervous energy that they feel like they're not doing nothing unless they're by their desk. And, they have to massage those anxieties themselves. But, when you go into camp, I want fresh, well-rested and clear-minded people, so that we can get the most accomplished that we can.
Just a couple of minutes left. Phil Longo is somebody that I got to know pretty well in the time that he was at Ole Miss. He had great admiration for you, but he said that you did not necessarily keep the same hours that everybody else kept. He said if he wanted to get you on the phone at 8 in the morning, good luck. But, 11, 12, 1 in the morning, no problem then. Are those still kind of the hours you keep?
Well, I'm a night person. With regard to football, though, I think I've always viewed football as kind of a swing shift. I don't do the early morning practices. I really don't understand those because you don't play any fourth quarters or at like 6 in the morning. I mean, we have 0 fourth quarters at that point in time. And then the other thing is, we practice at the traditional time, and you can't get your players until, the afternoon. And we get in there, get practice ready, which is probably mid-morning, and then we go out, and we have our meetings, and then we practice. And then I like watching the film right after practice. So practice ends, dinner, and then I like going in and watching that day's practice right then, which means, we're going to be there at night. So, with regard to early morning stuff, I would have to, just to handicap it, I'd say we're a great place to work. Sunday and Monday night, I'd say it's a fairly brutal place because we got all that film to get through, and we're going to get the game plan in. Game plan has to be in Monday night. So then it's probably relatively late. But after Monday, then it's once we watch the film, then you call some recruits, and then out you go, Yeah. But I don't believe in meeting just to meet. I don't believe in having hours just to have hours, outside of, having people in position so they can address any problems at the office with the players or the recruits,
Coach, we've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. I hope we can visit again soon. Wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll have football to talk about here before too terribly much longer.
Well, that sounds outstanding. Great talking to you guys.
You as well. That's Mike Leach, head football coach at Mississippi State. Covered a lot of ground there. We talked about kind of the stress of trying to install the entire offense without a spring practice. He doesn't seem to be overly worried about that, but said there is some unknown, especially with not having a team that's returning. Talked some about the role of Kylan Hill and what running backs have done in his offense, and Civil War history, and